necessarily mean that nature had fixed it.
Yeah.
That maybe I fixed it.
Yeah, well.
How long would it be residual?
It's all going to depend on, you know, how long that parent material, what levels they're at. So if it's highly deficient, like, you know, in that silt, where, I mean, there was almost nothing in the way of, it was what, potassium and phosphorus, right? So if it's almost nothing, eventually it's going to work its way. I mean, it could be 2 years, it could be 10. It's all going to depend on, you know, how fast that soil actually incorporates. So, like in your case, when you added all that potash, I think, you know, 5–10 years is not unlikely.
Shall I tell them the story?
What's that?
Shall I tell them the story?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah.
So,
The other state that he mentioned was Alaska. And my garden was on an old gravel bar, not just a silt bar. It wasn't gravel, no stones in it at all. Just real fine silt. And it nutrients near zero. So to hasten things along, burning wood as our heat source, I spread wood ashes on the garden for a number of years. When I did finally get the soil tested, the potassium and phosphorus levels were into these parts per million measurement, 800 and 900 parts per million, where it was crazy high, but grow a garden like you wouldn't believe.
Really?
The levels reduced gradually over the years. I suspect just plant uptake, but what I did was add nitrogen and stand back and let it grow. Throw a seed, a cabbage seed in the ground in August, it weighs 35 pounds.
Interesting.
But that was how I solved that problem. And I come to the conclusion there, I think it's accurate, that the potassium and phosphorus level, as long as you've got enough, you can't have too much. Is that?
well, I mean, there's some
Kinda
nutrient
like money.
tie-ins that come in, but yeah, absolutely. So yeah, the biggest thing is making sure that you've got all your levels where you need them. I mean, in your case, there wasn't a tie-up with different nutrients, so yeah, it's fine. But again, there you go. Just making sure of where you're at if there is a potential issue. But yeah, typically with your potassium, because it's helping with that plant health, I mean, yeah, obviously you want to have plenty of that in your soil if you possibly can. So.
Taylor, if you were a farmer and you had, say, 10,000 acres that you were cultivating every year, would you absolutely, for sure, routinely test nitrogen levels in your soil before you planted?
Depends on what you're doing. If you have a good rotation, my take on it is if you have good rotation between, and I think soybeans now is a good crop to bring in. A lot of guys are, because they're nitrogen fixing. Yeah, absolutely. So bringing in beans or some other nitrogen fixing type of crop in there into your rotation every couple of years is going to help, because obviously you have that residual from the next year.
But
So.
I truly in my heart believe that every farmer puts on Hydrosun every spring. No matter what the soil testing shows.
Yep.
They all think they have to put more on.
Well, and if you'll notice, what's one of the more fast-growing jobs that are out there today in the ag industry? It's agronomists. I mean, you talk to I don't know how many people in terms of like these different facilities and different centers that are actually selling agronomy type products, whether it be the spray and everything else. They're trying to get these agronomists who are going to help out with these producers.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends who are agronomists, that's what they're doing. They're running out into these different fields and figuring out, okay, where are their, you know, potassium levels, where are their, yep.
It doesn't make sense to check for nitrogen and then when it shows you have enough, go ahead and put more on anyway. Doesn't make sense.
Right.
Seems like a waste of money.
And that's
Well, it
just,
costs a lot of money, I'm sure.
it's the farmer's practice. It's whatever they want to utilize. I mean, and some guys, you know, some guys are dialed in and I mean, they've got it, I mean, to a T exactly where they need to go, not just with, you know, their different nutrients, but also with their seeding rates. I mean, technology has come so far in the last, you know, 30 years. I mean, now, not having a GPS system in a tractor is becoming more unheard of versus the opposite, where, you know, 5–10 years ago, people were looking at a GPS, you know, some of those old guys, oh, what the heck, you have a weavy row, you put more seeds in the ground.
I talked to a guy who said that he put his GPS to steer the tractor on and when he woke up, his crop was in.
Yeah. He must have got a really good system, because I haven't heard anything that nice.
Sounds like a farmer tall tale.
So, but yeah, no, I mean, testing your soil is pretty darn important, and I think, there's some guys that'll test it once and they kind of, or, a couple times, and they kind of understand, okay, I've got this much without the fertilizer, and that's why doing it before you do your applications is important. Like you said, if you've got enough nitrogen, do you necessarily have to throw more on? You're just taking a chance of having either too high nitrates if you're going to make hay, or potential burnout. So,
Are there home testing systems for nutrients?
they make those.
Oh, are they
So,
any good? Any very accurate?
well, I know NDSU does soil sampling,
Okay.
so I know we
Okay.
do send off tests. Talk to some people. It'll get you a ballpark figure.
Oh,
Most
okay.
of them, do a pretty decent job.
They work.
Okay.
Do you
Is that
soil
how you
test the
tested
garden
your
spot up here
atmosphere?
before you plot up in the spring?
We
No, I
haven't,
sent
no.
that.
It would be very interesting to see what happens, because my guess would be, if you do it for 10 years, everything gets leached out.
Well, and the interesting thing you talk about up there,
Yeah.
depending on which person's renting each plot, and there again, it's kind of like with Bob when he was up in Alaska. Depending on what you're incorporating into that soil, whether you're putting grass clippings or you're actually adding manure, that's going to change the dynamic of what your soil is anyhow. So,
I'm afraid I'm like the farmer that fertilized no matter what, because I put both manure and grass clippings.
okay. Well, if nothing else, you should have a good residual for next year, right?
Yeah.
If there's enough.
Yeah.
But-
I do that same thing. And
Yeah.
it works fine.
Mhm.
When you said you can't have enough, you can't have too much, I said it's just like money.
Yeah. Wish I had that problem, right?
Yeah, little is fine,
Yeah.
more is better.
Yeah.
Yeah. However, with fertilizer, that's definitely an area where we have to be pretty diligent on reading our label, because if you think about it, they can only die once. Poor suckers have to go through that. We don't have to put twice the amount. So,
Now, nitrogen seems to be the big exception to that. You can overdo nitrogen.
You
really
can.
easy.
yeah, you can actually burn stuff out. I know there's some, you talk about keep adding fertilizer, and say for example, you put manure down, you keep adding and keep adding. Especially, I talked about in July, putting the nitrogen out there. That's going to be more even versus, say you put 4 or 5 applications on. When it's under stress, especially in extreme heat, that's when you can burn that stuff out pretty darn quick. Or when it's young and still trying to grow, you have too much nitrogen, it could actually kill it off. So,
You had mentioned about the lawn, using the higher nitrogen in July. Does that same thing apply to, say, perennials? What do you know about, adding fertilizer to perennials?
okay, so you're talking like a bleeding heart or something like
Yeah.
that, or?
Yeah, and
If it's anything that's flowering, I guess my general rule of thumb, you talk about is there too much, phosphorus, potassium? In a situation like that, I would add something that's more of a 10-10-10,
okay,
just to keep that plant in the right spot. With grass, the way I view it, you're not necessarily wanting to go to seed at that point, right? In the summer, middle of July.
right.
So then why would you, add like say the potassium? So, or excuse me, the phosphorus.
Okay,
So,
So if it's just like right now, I mostly have like pots, flower pots.
mhm.
I just put some Miracle Grow. Is that maybe just, I've never looked at what the levels were in Miracle Grow, but
Okay.
would something like that just be fine and just following directions? Or?
Yeah. Biggest thing is following directions. So, and at the end of the day, you guys have to be able to sleep at night with whatever decision you made. So, if you want to throw some, 10-10-10 or whatever you want, go ahead. If it were me, heck, everybody weeds and tries to get rid of dandelions in their lawn. Personally, it's not going to be that big a deal to me. And if I take the chance of adding some clover, you talked about nitrogen fixing, that's going to help out with your, fertilizer bill in the end if you've got those little things. So, but yeah, as long as you follow the label with all that stuff, that's going to help you out more than anything.
Yeah, because I figure it's just a bunch of flower pots. Didn't think I needed to go out and buy a bag of whatever kind of fertilizer, 'cause it's,
I think Miracle Grow is pretty kind too. It doesn't,
burn things.
Yeah.
easily,
yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
So, and the other thing, talked about slow release if you've got potted plants. I would highly encourage you get like those slow release spikes and things like that, because then you don't have to worry about applying as much. Just hope you remember when you put it in, that way you remember to replace it. But,
Yeah, and I've used a few of those, like in a house plant, and it's like I look and it just seems like it's the same, and then I forget about it and don't do anything for a long time, so I don't know
Well,
if they're working.
and like we were talking about the different deficiencies in terms of watching what the leaves do, I mean, that's gonna be your telltale sign of, okay, is it going through an iron deficiency, is it, you know, nitrogen deficient? That's gonna be no different than grass or anything else. That'll tell you kind of what you're deficient in.
Could it be, I've got like a little ivy plant that was left over from my Cub Scout project, so I planted it, stuck it in a room all winter long, and it mostly died, but there were still a few branches or vines that came off, and it kind of, they would look like they were starting to die, but then you'd see new leaves every once in a while. So just like a deficiency of light. It just didn't seem like there was very much light this winter, and it's still hanging on, you're still seeing new leaves, but I just wonder if it was maybe just not enough sunlight for it.
Right. Well, I mean, that's part of the thing, especially through the winter. The other deal in terms of, you know, its ideal growing temp might be part of it. You know, the degree days, if you're turning on lights in the middle of the night, you know, here and there, those kind of things might throw it off a little bit too. But typically, you know, trying to keep it in whatever they recommend, whether it be, you know, partial shade, full sun, any of those kind of things. So, but yeah, in that case, I mean, making sure that it was, you know, had a little bit more full sun would have been nice.
Yeah, it was.
Because is it
sunny
taking off
short
now?
of it. I noticed there was some new leaves towards the end and a little bit new leaves, but I was kind of wondering if I should just stick it outside for a little while and just so that I get a little more sunlight.
Sunlight's a good thing, so
Yeah.
unless you're really pink and you got too much of a suntan, then it's not a good deal, but, yeah. So, anyway. Are there any other questions from any of you guys, or?
I just got one. I was just thinking about it. My daughter grew a spider plant for me when she was, I guess it was about fourth grade, I think. So she just finished 7. And like the first or second year, I had a bunch of baby spider plants. You know, I cut those off, you know, kind of let them grow, and it's never had babies since then. I don't know if.
So what, are you putting a fertilizer on it then, or not?
I think I put a spike in there once or twice, but
Okay.
I really, she made the pot, so I don't really want to replant it into a bigger pot. Is that something if I would need to do that?
And to be honest, with most of your potted plants, a lot of times it's actually a good thing if you can pull it out, put it into a new plant. Partly because of, you know, different bacteria, funguses, any of those kind of diseases that might come into, you know, to affecting your plant. And maybe
Yeah.
that could be part of
It
your
looks
issue.
fairly healthy, and it's still nice and big. It's just not producing any more babies.
Right. So a
It's still
situation
nice
like
and
that, adding some phosphorus, or you know, something that's got a little more phosphorus in it might be what you need to do.
Okay.
So, because that'll trigger that reproductive
Oh.
stage. So, and the other thing is, like I said, if you want to transplant it, I know you want to keep it in your daughter's container,
Yeah.
but even if you
It's
just
okay.
moved it out of the container, and it's a good practice, you know, once a year, once every 2 years to sterilize the inside of whatever container you're in. Try and incorporate some different potting soil in there. Again, just for soil health, or for plant health.
Yeah, I wonder if to like sterilize it and then just put it back in, or is there a way to kind of break off part of it? I mean, I don't know much about spider plants.
I mean, in terms of propagation, see that spider plants aren't my forte, I guess.
Right.
So,
Mine either.
but in terms of, you know, actual reproduction, I mean, obviously it's got those shoots that shoot out from the side. So if you wanted to start new ones, which I don't know if you're just wanting to keep the one you have, but yeah, you can always try and break up a little bit of that the old soil if you wanted to. The biggest thing is make sure you don't harm those roots too darn much, which I'm sure if it's grown in that pot hard or enough, it's probably just solid roots anyway, right? Or pretty
Probably,
close
I
to
would
it.
imagine it's a clay pot, so I was kind of nervous about even trying to take it out of the pot.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't want to damage the pot or the plant, but
Right.
I wasn't quite sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, how do I get it out of the pot? I figured you just have to turn it upside down and dump it out.
And
Yeah.
sometimes what some people do, because it's so massive in the amount of roots material that it has typically, I mean, even if you just take, you know, like a knife on the outside and just make sure you stay on the very outside and just scrape, so that hopefully it kind of pulls that suction or that growth so it's not as expanded, it at least
Okay.
will come out. Kind of like a pie pan type of deal if you're making pineapple upside down cake kind of deal. So only thing is you don't put flour on the inside. But,
Right.
yeah. So,
Hmm.
okay. Any other questions, or is everybody good?
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys for coming, I
Thanks.
appreciate it.